Ladies and gentlemen, ATDF Everything in That Shelf presentation. You're now rocking with TDF Everything. Spoiled Rotten.
Spoiler alert.
Welcome back, everybody.
Hey.
It's me, Daniel,
And it's Ben
on Spoiled Rotten.
on that shelf.
Boom. It's time for the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, episode 3, Power Broker.
That's right. It's been hinted at quite a bit. It's been Easter egg drop, and now it's front and center. The mystery.
Well, we still don't know who
right
the Power
there.
Broker is.
Right, but the mystery I'm saying is like it's no longer like, ooh, there was like that little excerpt in like the credits.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's not. No, it's Power Broker dead center. We're facing it. We're definitely gonna like figure out who this is, but this is I'm liking this like small little reveals building up into a bigger thing here. This is awesome.
It's what I liked about the first episode. I felt like it gives you the sense of like, yeah, I get what's going on, and then they'll introduce something like, oh fuck, okay, they're doing something different, and it doesn't feel like they're pulling the rug from out under you. It's just like, oh no, the show's still revealing itself to you, and I think it's the right way to do week-to-week television.
Correct. Like it's because last week when they did the Zemo reveal at the end, you see his face, you do all that kind of stuff. Like they're going to get Zemo. You have all these like things, and you think like, oh, based on what happened before, that it's going to go a certain way, and then the way it goes this like episode is just it's so much better than what you thought it would be, because it's just like it's.
I do want to get there because I've heard some opposing opinions,
right?
And I don't agree with, but I want to get there. So yeah,
sure.
The episode starts off with the Global Repatriation Council. So that's what we were talking about last episode. Is that that's kind of what John and Hoskins were talking about, was that because of all of that stuff, things are in flux. I still think you brought up a good point that it's still kind of murky what the deal is, but I do think that this episode brought that front and center, that this is the world's government's trying to, well, at least the American government trying to put stuff back in place.
And they're basically trying to reestablish the world before the blip, right?
Yes. And you can see that it looks all like, you see different ethnicities hugging, and it looks like it's really good, but then obviously you get to the reality of the smash cut to John and Lamar in the truck, like ready to shake some people down, which I guess was my first thing. I was like, oh, like I feel like this episode they're like, forget about and I do kind of mean it in a negative way, like forget about the nuance of John. He's just a bad guy. Like it seems like he's just a bad guy now.
Yeah. It's his like, I mean, toward the end of the episode, it's full on established, like his elitism, his entitlement, everything. It's the line,
and it is in this episode too that he bursts in there and he's like, "You got Carly Morgenthau, like give it to me," and the person spits in his face. So I'm aware that it's very hard to like keep your composure when you're doing that.
Yes,
but it is like, just the fact that he was spit on anyway, like there is no respect for him, and the fact that it's like, you Americans are just turning into brutes, which I'm assuming comes from a sense of like, we had 5 years of you guys not being brutes, and now you're just right back to being brutes. I'm assuming is the commentary there, because like, it's not like Americans are just turned into brutes. So it's like, oh my god, you guys are back to this now, like fuck you guys, and he spits in his face, and you see like the impotence of John in that scene of him like not really hurting him, but throwing him up against the wall and just being like, do you know who I am? And it's like, yikes. And I get it. You shouldn't really compare him to Steve, even though that's what the show wants you to do. But it just seems like not even Sam would do that.
No one would really do that. I mean, like arguably,
like Tony wouldn't do that. Like Tony would have done it in he probably would have said, do you know who I am? But he wouldn't have lost his cool.
He would have done it in a mocking way. Like he would have done it more like in the like, I wouldn't imagine Tony ever being like, do you know who I am? I would imagine Tony walking into a room like, obviously you all know who I am, kind of deal, like just like spinning it that way, as opposed to, because like when anyone says, do you know who I am, obviously they're being like, they're shook up in that sense where it's like, hey, I'm supposed to be a big deal
Yeah,
in
it's
this
telling
world,
that
and it
they've
bothers
lost
me.
some.
Yeah,
They've lost some ground. They perceive
there's
that they've lost some ground.
yeah, there's no
If
clout
they're
on their
saying,
end
yeah.
or something like that. It's just like, oh, I'm a really big fish in this pond. Okay, yeah, but bro, you're in a different pond now. You can't do that. And that's exactly what Captain America is doing in that. The John Walker Captain America is doing in that situation, right? He's lost that control. Like, don't get me wrong, getting spit on, especially like that, is a form of assault.
Yeah,
but
no, like I'm not saying how
yeah.
dare he get angry about it.
Yeah.
It's more just
Yeah.
like the fact that he even got spit on at all. He already lost. Like that was the loss, not how he reacted to being spit on. Just the fact that that person didn't feel like, oh, good, Captain America is here, or it's Captain America. I can reason with him. It was just, oh, I'm gonna spit on you because fuck you.
Yeah, it wasn't the idea of like, that scene kind of comes in and you're expecting some sort of like manipulative play, like a good cop bad cop situation where it's like, oh yeah, here are all the bad guys busting down, and then Captain America like coming in and be like, okay, whoa, hold it, let's be less formal, let's just have a conversation, like that's what you're expecting it to be. But it's like at least from the perspective of like, oh, if he's trying to manipulate a narrative, then he would try to do something like that, right? Where like let everyone else that's on the same team enter in, rough him up, and then he comes in to pretend to be the good guy, right? So the fact that he doesn't even do that is just like, no, I'm reinforcing what everyone's doing. Don't let them do this. Don't let them delete anything. Deny them of counsel of like human rights and all that kind of stuff, and just interrogate.
He has no human side to this, and and the whole "do you know who I am" kind of counteracts. And I guess they only have 6 episodes, but it did seem like a very quick like turn to like, no, he's like, forget about the last episode. He's not a humble guy. He's just a dick.
Yeah, he's just entitled, and he's
I
just
think
like,
they do with another character later on, and I'm like, oh
yes,
I guess this is just a timing issue.
For sure.
But yeah, the last interesting part of this scene is obviously Hoskins takes him out, and he's kind of like, dude, like what the hell, like what are we gonna do? Yeah, and he says, let's bet on someone who has a better hand, and I'm assuming he means Sam and Bucky, but
that's 100% what I'm
and it's kind of like
equating that to.
I don't know how much he knows of what they're doing because he doesn't have the Red Wing thing anymore to like track them, but maybe they still are. It seems like he has inside information on them.
Well, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if they've used some sort of spy technology that Sam and Bucky are not aware of. That's completely unethical to use. I'm thinking like maybe some eavesdropping software, kind of like the Dark Knight thing, where where they're like, oh, every cell phone could be tapped in if the government was able to do this. Like, it's certainly painting out this government to be like, listen, we had to do a lot of different things. Like even Thunderbolt Ross being like, to be even Nick Fury on that side being like, to be perfectly honest, this is why we're developing weapons, is because of Thor. Like he showed up last year and he made us look like chumps, and we have to defend ourselves. And like even like the quote good guys will have that same mentality of like, no, but we got to ante up too. It's it's telling this really, really good story in there, I think.
Yeah, so then we move on to see Bucky and Sam basically be like, well, no, you can't meet with Zemo because you're an Avenger, which I only find interesting because I'm like, I feel like Far From Home asked the question, is there even such a thing as the Avengers anymore? Like, like it's not like they're meeting up with well, I guess he did meet up with James Rhodes, but like no one else, like it's not like Ant-Man and everybody is like hanging out. It's kind of just like they all separated. So I don't know, but I get the point. It was just interesting to be like, no, you're an Avenger still. Like, and I know that everyone in terms of fame considers him an Avenger, but
yes,
we see that it doesn't really get him anything. Like,
no, it doesn't come with any
nothing.
There's no there's no perks to it. It's just like, cool, I have a membership card. That doesn't cool.
But basically they meet up. I like that he does the like code again, and he's like, that's not gonna work, and he's like, no, I know, I just wanted to know like what you do if I did that.
That was great.
I like
right off the bat,
kind of like, he's like, no, I know what's going on, I just thought it might be funny to do that to you.
Yeah, the thing that I really drew from that scene was like, okay, Zemo's been held in this confinement for such a long time, but even in that regard, still has ability to find out information that Bucky was. I don't know the extent of the information, but that basically we know that Zemo knows upon the first time meeting Bucky again that he's deactivated. Like, that's crazy to me that he's got those kind of connections that
well,
even
I think
in
it's because he was
confinement.
pardoned. So I would imagine Zemo would know, oh, he's pardoned. So that must mean they think he's safe enough to walk around.
But still, why would Zemo get that information in where he's at? Like, you would expect that he would be like, oh, you get no liberties at all or nothing like that.
I just
like
think it's less of him having like secret spies that know things, because that would be public knowledge because otherwise he would have to like hide himself every time he walks around. It would have to be something everyone knows he's been pardoned.
I get that.
So that
I get that, but I'm still saying,
which
like,
would be on the news, which you can still get in jail. Like, you could still see the news in prison.
Right. I don't know if the crime that he committed created a separate kind of like detention center for him. Like, just like, oh, you haven't been.
It seemed like he was in a regular prison.
Yeah.
Like,
okay.
It seemed like he was. Like, I mean, that's the next point I wanted to get to. It didn't seem like he was in like some secret place.
That's
like,
true.
He was in a place where they can play chess and like.
Yeah.
You know,
it definitely wasn't the level of what that arc thing was that Tony built.
No, but he wasn't in the raft.
Yeah.
I'm sure
he wasn't in the raft.
Realize,
that's it.
I feel like people realize, oh, that's not humane. Like, you can't just have people on the raft. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't know if that was like him being like, oh, I know things about you. I think he was just like, yeah, I know you're deactivated because everyone has to know that information.
I see. I thought it was just his way of like flexing. It was like, hey, I've been in here, but I still got my ways of getting information and all that kind of stuff, because that's what Zemo's real power is. Like that, I guess, power, to quote like the idea of like the mastermind, right?
Yeah.
To just manipulate stuff. So I'm really interested to see what he's going to do.
So I liked how they kind of just hand waved the escape. He's like, here's a little hypothetical. He's like, what if this happened? And then you realize, oh, this just really happened. I like that. People are like, no, that's shitty. How come he can get out so easily? And I was like, I don't know. Like, they think that that's like betraying the character. And I'm like,
no,
I don't know. Like, I feel like his whole thing is he knows what he's doing and he picks his moments. So like, to the extent that I've heard people be like, well, if it was that easy, why didn't he just do that before? I'm like, I feel like now he has a reason to get out.
Yeah. Like why?
Now he's like, oh, like, I get out, but then I also have the help of these two good guys flanking me. Like, I can move with more immunity now. It's not like I get out and then they chase me down and put me back. It's like, oh, I can get out and now I have people that want to keep me out.
Yeah.
Like,
but also,
because you see Sam constantly, oh, you're going back to jail, and Bucky being like, no, like, we can't put him back because he has to help us. So for me, it was like, it is the mental chess that he does of like, yeah, it's not that hard to get out of here, but also I can get out and have people actually be interested in keeping me out.
Right. Yeah.
That's a good point about it.
I think that's a really, really good point. I agree. I feel like Zemo is one of those guys that's smart enough to actually, if he wanted to figure out how to get in jail, he would have done it by himself, and he would have done it already. But like, if there's no motivation to do it, because I want to just point out the idea, like the last time we see Zemo in the MCU is after Civil War, where he's accomplished what he's wanted to accomplish. He effectively destroyed he effectively destroyed the Avengers and all this kind of stuff. And where do you go from that point? Because he was ready to kill himself. He was ready to die. Like, what was his, like, you got to think like, okay, if you're in that kind of situation, that kind of mental state, you got to kind of like pull yourself out of that and find a new reason to keep going. Otherwise, you can be perfectly content staying in that jail cell. You know what I mean? It's not like he wanted to get out. He achieved. Avengers. Yeah, he achieved what he wanted to achieve. So what's the motivation for getting out? It's not like, oh, I didn't break the Avengers up. Now that's my life goal is I have to go out. Like, you could argue that his newfound thing is to stop super soldiers from being created because that is the thing. But he doesn't know that there's super soldiers. Bucky brings that information to him. Exactly.
Again, I don't know if he just found out. My thing is,
true.
Even if he knew, now he has advocates for him staying out of prison.
Correct. He's got people defending him,
invested in keeping him out.
Yes.
So now I feel like people really downplay how, and I understand people can be like, oh, it works on a lot of coincidences, sure, but in that world, he is a thinker. So whether or not you as an audience member believe that he could have thought of all those things happening, the movies are telling you that is what he does. So even if this is all too much of a coincidence for people that this is the time they want to come and get him, I still feel like it's all part of his plan of like, they come to me, they get me out, or I get myself out, but they'll keep me out. I think that's all part of it. So
Yeah.
however he factors into this, I think it is part of the plan and not some weird, like, we're just moving along because we don't want to dedicate an episode to the breakout. I think it is, he is smart enough to think of a very straightforward way of getting out. It's just now it's the best time to do it.
Yeah. And to be perfectly honest, I completely agree with you on that part. The fact that he was like hypothetically and it was cut together with the breakout thing, I thought that was the best way of moving the episode forward.
I loved it. I thought it was really fun.
I did not want in any way, shape, or form to have this show, which is definitely not the intent of like, ooh, it's a jailbreak episode or it's this episode. It's not that kind of show. It is avoiding the WandaVision, oh, this is one movie told over multiple episodes kind of pitch to us. It's avoiding that really, really well, but it's still, in a sense, it's not that type of show where it's like, here's the bottle episode, here's the wedding episode, here's the, that kind of stuff where like they're feeding off the tropes of classic TV. They're doing things that are just like, no, we know that Prison Break, if you want to watch a Prison Break movie or a show, go watch Prison Break. This is a show about Falcon Winter Soldier, and I love
this is just how Zemo works in this universe.
I agree.
I don't think you have to like it, but I don't think it's some kind of betrayal of the character or betrayal of what needs to happen with this show. I think
I agree.
He is a marker then, if that's what you want to say, and like this is how he operates. It's very smooth.
Yes.
There isn't a lot of like, oh, I gotta figure this out. It's just like, no, he has thought about it already, and this is how he actions it. So one thing I wanted to point out that I really liked was that Bucky is basically like, come on, man, like you once put your neck on the line for me because Steve told you to. I'm just asking you to do this again.
Yeah.
And Sam, I feel, genuinely considers it, and it's like, okay. And it's what I think they're doing a good job of showing, like, there's another time that we'll get to where I'm like, I feel like Sam genuinely cares about Bucky, and I do know that. I feel like last episode showed that Bucky cares about Sam as well. And I don't mean the whole you need to be the captain because then Steve's wrong. I mean like things like trying to like give him a bit of hope by showing him Isaiah Bradley or something like that. Like, I feel like there was things he was doing, or just like acknowledging like, I shouldn't show my privilege by telling you what to do. Like I think he does. I think they care about each other, and I like that, which is why I said I hated in the last episode when he's like, we'll just never see each other again. He's like, fine. I was like, no, you guys love each other. But anyway, I liked that moment that they took some time out to be like, will you just trust me on this? This isn't like we just need to move and everything's gonna. It's like, no, we're slowing things down for this beat to be like, are you legitimately in on this? Please, can you be in on this?
And even then, like, there's genuine friendship moments there. I think, and this comes in a later scene where you find out about Zemo and his royalty and all that kind of stuff. Where
that's what I wanted to get to next.
I see. Okay, we're on the same page. We are
on the same page.
Cool.
The only reason I didn't want you to say what you were going to say is because this was another point of contention I've seen online of like, well, if he's just rich, what's the point now? And I'm like, what? I don't understand how him being rich ruins anything about that.
It doesn't ruin anything. It just
why is it like I've heard people be like, oh, but like, what does it matter? Like, I thought it was all about how his family died. I'm like, he can still be mad his family died.
Yeah.
Like,
and he could, and,
like,
and even and layering this on top of everything too, it actually, I think, makes it so much more tragic.
Like the place that
Zemo.
made him important is now gone. Yeah, like
exactly.
I can see how that is a big deal to him.
Think about the idea
because of Sokovia.
Yeah, think of the idea of like, okay, you're Sokovian royalty, for example, and your country was just destroyed. Your culture is just destroyed. Your family is just. You now have more motivation, if anything, to go after the Avengers. And everything he said was right. Like, and the thing is, and I'm hoping you bring us to that airplane scene because there's so much to dissect with it. But it's just, there's, to me, that revelation that he's rich and that he's royalty and that he was royalty prior to the Avengers coming in and doing that kind of stuff, or actually, to better yet, Ultron coming in, not because that wasn't specifically Avengers.
They did create Ultron.
Well, they did.
And I think
this,
people know that.
Yeah, they did. But it's just the idea, like, I don't know. I'm not gonna go into that detail too much. But the idea of like that he was royalty, I'm like, no, I think that's great because it gives Zemo more motivation. It means more things were taken away from him.
Patriotic, like, and
exactly.
Throughout the episode, he cares that, like, oh, did you even go? Well, whatever. We'll get to it. But yeah, he's like, did you even go to the memorial? Of course not. Like, you fucking idiots. Like,
yeah,
like
that was a good line.
And like that he talks about, oh, and people are just picking apart Sokovia to like expand their borders and stuff like that.
As a fallen
I don't see how him being rich changes anything. I think
it doesn't change anything.
It explains how he has the resources to do what he was doing.
Yeah, and it also adds on top of thing.
Yeah, like if you thought before, like, how come this soldier can do all these things? It's like because he's a Baron. Like, and also that is the character name from the comics, Baron Zemo.
Yeah.
I don't know. I did genuinely was taken aback by people pushing back against him being rich. I was like, what? They just eventually got to the character, and they're like, "Oh, weird. It's like this." They were saying like, "Oh, Malcolm Spellman doesn't understand the characters he's using. Everyone seems like they're different." Like, I don't think that Zemo's different. I think you just know more about him now.
I think you just know more about him. I think if there's anything to pick apart, I think it would be the idea of why is a member of royalty going out killing Hydra agents? I think that would be the question, I mean, more than anything else, because it's just
like Prince William and Prince Harry have served in the army as well. Not to the extent they're not superheroes. Like,
I get that.
So it's not. So it is a thing that is done.
It's done.
He just did it less ceremonially than,
or maybe his like when he was in, or maybe when he was in there, he found his enemy of the super soldiers, and like this is, and I'm sure there's more reasons for why, because the little rant he goes on for why superheroes are dangerous is very, very psychologically interesting. It's a very interesting discussion to break into. But the issue with that is like, okay, where is it coming from? Because there's never been a Sokovian superhero that's been like corrupted or whatever, right? It just seems like, oh, okay, you have people like Red Skull and Captain America, who he equates to be basically two sides of the same coin, and it's a very interesting discussion, but I'm just like, where is this rage coming from, specifically from Sokovia, aside from the fact that the Ultron thing happened, right? Is that specifically like, I hate Captain America, I hate superhero people now, or like what, like, and is he finding like data from the past of being like, and Red Skull was this, and like, here's my evidence. Like, what's your take on that?
I don't know the question.
I'm just trying to figure it out myself, actually, to be honest here. His hatred of superheroes, do you feel like that was born completely out of the Ultron thing, or was there a pre-existing thing before that was the reason why he hated superheroes? And because I think
what gets lost with Zemo is that he is a bad person.
Yes.
I think a lot of people are just like, oh no, he was just some guy that his family died, and then it's like, no,
he's a bad person.
He's someone who would need to consolidate power. So if you have superheroes, it's harder to consolidate power that way. So it's already in his best interest to be able to, at least if he's not a superpower, control the superpowers, which he couldn't do. So you need to clear them off the board. Like, I think, you forget that he killed T'Chaka. He like kills all the time, just to, and even says to Bucky earlier, like, oh yeah, sorry, I used you as a puppet. I just, nothing personal. Like, he doesn't actually care about those individuals. He's doing it for country or whatever, and I believe that. And once you kill his family, it becomes a bit more personal. But I don't think that. I don't think that the lens of like, oh, he's just a good guy, and why did he start hating? No, he's just someone that's needs to consolidate power, and
correct,
and superheroes challenge that.
And the point of the mentality behind him, and comparison, a parallel comparison to the John Walker Captain America, is that the idea that their philosophy is that the ends justifies the means. Right. In many cases, Baron von Zemo, he doesn't say those words, but the way he treats people and uses them and assassinates and then manipulates the narrative is very, very, very easily understood as the end justifies the means. Like, this is like, oh, I had to kill T'Chaka to start this rift between the Avengers, and like to do all this kind of stuff, like, and then and then to continue killing Hydra people and making sure super soldiers don't exist and all that kind of stuff. Like that to me is like, it's you can empathize with him, and that's what this episode does very, very well, is that even with the Flag Smashers, even with like everything else, they're trying to create empathy, and then like there's a giant moment where it's like, oh, take that empathy away. Just because you understand them doesn't mean you should agree with them.
Yeah, no, I'll get that, but let's talk about this plane ride, because it's
really this plane ride is great.
So he does the whole, like, she shows off he's a Baron, he's got his own Alfred. And then he basically in Sokovian is like, look, if the food is bad, give it to them. Like, I like that little detail, just to like, because I do feel like people forget, like, no, this guy's a bad guy. Like, why would you do that?
He's a dick.
But anyway, then he has that they have the conversation where he pulls out Bucky's notepad. And he's like, oh, who's this? Just to like twist the screws a bit more.
Yeah.
And I found it interesting. I'm glad the conversation where it did, but I was like, it's weird that Sam's takeaway was, hey, that's the notebook Steve had. Did you listen to Trouble Man? And he's like, I don't know, I like 40s. And Bucky was like, I don't know, I like 40s music. And he's like, you don't like Marvin Gaye? And I like that Zemo was like, it is a perfect explanation of the African American experience. Yeah. And Sam being like, well, I mean, he's out of line, but he's right. Yeah.
I like that. It's the idea of like he's like every now and then, because that is true, right? It's like, okay, yeah, like you're a shitty person, but fundamentally I agree with that.
Well, point. I don't know that album is the perfect example of
no, it's
like,
not,
I think I just think it for Sam it is, so that's fine. Yes, but like
it means something to Sam, and I think
he loves
you
it,
and I
like that. He's like, no, and Steve loves Marvin Gaye, and he's like, yeah, I like Marvin Gaye. That's not my thing.
Yeah, I feel like in many ways, Sam, in that reaction to that book, was the idea of like, oh my God, you could be my new friend, like Steve was, because he's basically mourning the death of his friend. Like everyone in this series is mourning the loss of the real Captain America. No, I mean the not that he's dead, but that he's gone. He's no longer.
I would say he's maybe mourning the death of that work relationship.
Okay, that's a great way of putting it too. But either way, this series is showing you, okay, the void left by Captain America as interpersonal relationships from the nation, how America stands, and all this kind of stuff. It's grieving the loss of Captain America in many different ways, right? And this, in that moment, I was just like, wait, what you said the other episode with the therapist was bullshit. That was just you trying to get out of an uncomfortable situation. I get that, but you're clearly trying to be his friend. Otherwise, you wouldn't care about what Bucky thinks about Trouble Man at all. Because to me, I'm like, when someone's like,
honestly,
hey, this song is
I think that was more of an ego thing than it was.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that was him being like, hey, Steve liked my recommendation. Do you like my recommendation?
Because I thought it was more along the lines of like
funny back and forth for them, but I don't know how much of that is him taking stock in hoping that Bucky likes something. I think it's more just like I gave a recommendation to Steve that he really liked. Right. And it would be nice if you liked my recommendation too, but I think that's more for him than it is for them.
Yeah, but that seems like a friendship thing, right? I mean, like I wouldn't recommend stuff to people if I don't care about.
I think they're friends. I don't know that scene.
Well, they're not willing to admit it, that's for sure. But they are like the stuff like that to me. I'm like, that's a friendship thing. That's clearly a friendship thing. Like if someone's like,
here's
hey,
what I would say. It happens in friendships, but I do find that it's weird when someone is trying to impose their taste on someone else.
I do find that. I agree. I'm like, what, so you didn't like this?
It does happen in a friendship. I don't think that's a friendship building thing. I think that's a, hey, I have this taste. You should have this taste. Then we can be together.
For sure. I feel like it's one of those. Yeah, that's true.
So you're right. It does happen in a friendship. I don't know
friendly.
If it's a positive thing in a friendship.
That's true. It is a friendly thing, but that kind of behavior is, I will admit, filled with a lot of judgment and criticism, and it's not cool. Let people like what they like for the reasons that they like.
Yes, cool. But yes, and you've already touched on Zemo talking about icons and how they get perverted. So I think that was a good thing to touch on. But
I thought that was a fantastic discussion.
And I'm like, oh fuck, we're almost at the end.
We do this
runtime of the episode. It's fine.
Yeah,
I mean, who cares? But I did want to hopefully get everything out before we get to like the 2 hour mark.
Okay.
but yeah, basically that's where they bring up Madripoor for the first time. But we'll go back into the details of that because the next scene is Carly dealing with the death of Doña Madani, who I was just like, I don't know who that is to her, but like she cares about this. She feels like she failed this person, and I don't know if that was like someone they gave a dose of the serum to and it just didn't work.
I feel like it's one of those people. So I feel like that's why the vaccine thing was like, because that was a vaccine that could have saved her life or something like that. And I just personally feel like maybe, and I'm projecting here. I'm obviously projecting here, but I'm writing this in my mind that was a mother figure to all those kids.
I would imagine
during a blip. Yeah, like during the blip, there was a lot of refugees, I would imagine, and that people being like, how do I find each other? And I'm imagining that woman was responsible for raising Carly and a bunch of those kids during that 5-year period of time, or that there was a family developed in there.
Yeah, definitely a family unit, because I couldn't even really tell what her age was when on the deathbed.
But it's very short, and of course when people are dying they look older. So
yes, either way it is a familial bond.
Yes.
I don't think it's actual. I mean, it's not blood family, but it is a family that was created.
Family is chosen.
Yep. Yeah.
The chosen family for sure.
So there is that planting that seed, as you said, trying to give you more empathy for this character.
I also like that discussion that her and the Australian guy have, where they're like, "Hey, where they're trying to build up that empathy is like, hey, did you ever imagine you doing this? It's like, no, I thought I'd be a teacher, and being like,
that's later. I wanted to get to that later.
Oh, sorry. I'm just confusing things right now. But yeah, that
because I do think that's an important conversation, but that is later, because right after that they do the whole walking into Madripoor, which again, Zemo has I shouldn't say insight, has opinions on Black people, because Sam goes, well, we need to change because I'm the only one out of us that looks like a pimp. And he's like, well, only Americans would see a well-dressed Black man and think that he's a pimp, which I like as commentary, because it is because he was also talking about being in cells, and he's like, you know about being in a cell, and he looks at Sam, and I think that is later, but it is also describing the cell of being Black in America, which is what I like about the show, is talking about the constrictions of being Black in white spaces, specifically in North America, because that's where I live. So that rings true. But what Zemo's saying is true, because you can look at them like, he looks like a pimp, but that is a thing for Black people. You have to dress a certain way, or if you dress too nicely, people are like, well, how did you get that? And the assumption is like, well, it must be a basketball player or a drug dealer. That is like, you couldn't just be someone who dresses well. Because how did you get the money for it?
Yeah, and that commentary behind what Zemo said, I mean, that is, it confused me, and I was really hoping you'd talk about that, but that's wonderful. Thank you for that. But yeah, that was a very interesting kind of scene, and even the idea of like showing him the picture of Smiling Tiger, who is in Easter egg character. I think X-Men is an X-Men character, right? But the Madripoor is like filled with
Madripoor is an X-Men location. So
so it's one of those things where it's like, oh, and the thing I love, I'm not seeing a lot of online activities like, ooh, and this is a thing for this, but there's a little bit of that, but not all.
As I said off mic, a lot of different people like Charles Murphy and other scoopers really got burnt on WandaVision. So I think the speculation has simmered down a bit.
They're trying to simmer it down a little bit. There are Easter eggs, but not the same way that people are spinning.
But I liked that moment. Again, it's taking time to actually do character stuff. Because the other thing about that is, and I know that Zemo isn't a Nazi, but in the comics, the first iteration of him is a Nazi, and that was always a tactic of the Nazis of, hey, Black people, don't, like, why are you fighting for America? They're really shitty to you. Like, we'll take care of you, even though they were going to definitely kill them. Just like the propaganda of like getting inside your head of like, hey, like, you should, why do you fight for America? They're shitty. And it's not going to be better with them, but that's the seed they're trying to plant, that it would be better if you worked with the Nazis. So I thought was interesting that information came from that comment came from Zemo.
That's pretty interesting. I didn't see that from that lens, but that's wonderful to see.
It's I know it's mirroring, for me anyway, it's mirroring what he said on the plane, which I was like, No, I mean that's a very good album. I don't think that's every Black person's experience, but it's a great album. Whereas this comment was like, you're kind of out of line, but also you're right that like this is something that you're conditioned to think you look like a pimp, even though you're just dressing well. And you shouldn't feel anything about that. So, and that's why I said it was character work, because it is playing into the imposter syndrome that Sam is feeling throughout this series.
Absolutely.
He's like, hey man, like that's just your American conditioning. Don't get caught up in that.
It's true. It's true. It does show, like, I do love how this show, even though it's done through Sam's lens, and like even then, like he's still learning things about his own identity and all that kind of stuff. Because I thought that comment that Zemo made was just such an interesting one. I'm like, is that actually true? Is that something like
it's
only
definitely true that if you dress a certain way as a Black person, assumptions will be made about you. And just growing up, I knew that like I had to dress a certain way if I was going to drive my dad's car, because my dad's car is associated with certain things.
I see.
And again, this is all what we talk about when we talk about white privilege. It's not the fact that I didn't have anything monetarily or physically, materially. It's that the things I did have needed to be dealt with in a very specific way because of who I am. Which isn't something that factors in for white people.
I agree. It's just like the idea of like, and I get what you're saying entirely, and it's a really interesting thing to put that on display through this dialogue. I hope it makes people think a little bit more, because I hope so.
I don't think it will.
A lot.
I hope so, but
I agree with that as well. I agree with that as well.
I'll say this before we move forward. I am already exhausted by the coverage of this show, of people just being like, yeah, it's just a nice little Marvel action thing. I'm like, no, it's not. Like,
I would agree with that. I find a lot of the YouTube people that are covering this show, and I'm not going to point anyone out or anything like that, or a lot of content creators.
I will. Fundamentally, Screen Junkies.
Okay. Yeah. There you go. Yeah. I would agree with that. There's a lot that their analysis. I'm like, oh, that's not just a nice moment. That means something drastic. You're really putting your privilege out on display when you dismiss a scene like that.
I mean, they are from Screen Junkies, but that Hal Rudnick and Lon Harris, like I tried to listen to their podcast. We're like, yeah, whatever, it's just this. And I'm like, sorry, I just listened to Hal Rudnick like wax poetic about Justice League Snyder Cut and how great it was with character work, and then you just dismiss Falcon and Winter Soldier. It's like, oh, it's just some action stuff. And I'm like,
that to me is like, no, if someone's gonna be like, oh, Justice League was great for character work, and dismiss Falcon Winter Soldier like that, I'm like, you need to take a closer look at Zack Snyder's work historically, because he has always mishandled characters. And I like what you said about it in the Uncolonized podcast, where you're talking about with Gavin, where you're talking about like how Zack Snyder just uses avatars to do things, and the characters are treated as avatars. And I'm like, that's exactly how I feel about every Zack Snyder movie, is that Leonardo, Donatello, that's Michael Bay. But every Zack Snyder movie, I'm like, no, they're just avatars doing things for the audience. Like it barely feels like a character
for the characters.
Yeah, it's just like, and whether or not that's Zack Snyder's intent is just like, I want the audience to have a good, fun time. I'm like, okay, if that's your intent, cool. But like you're making it seem like you're doing other stuff too, which is not really there.
I think this show is not getting the credit it deserves. I feel the same way about WandaVision, but that's their own fault for how they released it.
Yes.
And how they did interviews about it.
Yeah, and Paul like Bettany too. We can put it on Paul Bettany a little bit.
I still think both of these shows did some really good character work, and that will always be lost in how it was disseminated and what people think of Marvel before they actually interact with a Marvel property.
I agree. I think so personally for myself, like watching with my partner Stacy, there are scenes where she doesn't see it through the same lens that I do, because she's not a person of color, obviously. And when I break down some of those scenes, she's like, oh my God, I didn't realize that. I'm like, yeah, that means a lot. Like, that's why wording is very, very important. Like that's, you gotta be aware of the subtext of what's being said, as opposed to what, all this kind of stuff. And he's like, oh my God, it's like you guys are having to listen to, it's like I have to listen to two languages at the same time. I'm like, yeah. That's basically what happens when people talk. I'm like, here's what you're saying. Here's what you mean. That's what we always have to do, right? And this show is filled with that, and that's why I think a lot of people, it's just going above their heads because they're not.
And I'm not saying this is dealing with it perfectly. I'm saying for a Marvel show that is supposed to entertain more than it is supposed to, they are doing things they haven't done before.
Correct.
And I'm hoping it's building blocks towards having more well thought out things.
Yes. And it's also one of those things where Marvel's criticism in the past has been like they're not exploring these perspectives enough. And here it is full on display, and it's not perfect. Nothing ever will be in these regards. But it's a genuinely good attempt.
They can't explore it the way they should because that's not
exactly
the main function of it, but it is a nice layer in it, I think.
Because the only I guess content that really truly can explore it to that degree would be a documentary, which is obviously not this, right? So you can only layer in those elements in this and put characters in those positions and like remind people, but like it's never going to be perfect. But one thing you can definitely say is this is a really good attempt at really just bringing those things head on. But anyways, we kind of gotten away from it a little bit.
They basically lure out the power broker second, who is Selby, by creating a bar fight. One thing I liked was that Sam had to drink that snake thing, because I'm like, oh, I did that when I was in Vietnam.
Oh,
like,
did
I
you?
don't know exactly what they were doing in this show, but I was like, oh, I've had to take a shot like that in Vietnam, like when we were hanging out in, I want to say Halong Bay, but like but it was just funny because I'm like, this show is really showing, because it'll happen later when he's actually in the room with Selby, like he's just really bad at being a bad guy, like which I think is, again, good character work, because it's like, that's what Steve saw. I was like, you should have the shield because it's so not in your nature to be a bad guy, versus what happens with Bucky, where he just goes right back into Winter Soldier mode. And and again, Zemo comments on it, and he's like, it didn't take much for him to slide back into that. And this was the second time where I was like, this is Sam showing how much he cares about Bucky, that they take a pause. He puts a hand on him, and Zemo's like, you can't do that. But then he still is like, but still, like, are you good? Like, it's a very serious moment of like, we have to do all of this stuff, but I need to know that you're okay. Like, I want that for you. Are you still good?
Yeah, that was a situation where I'm like, that did put Sam's genuine good-heartedness on display. It's the idea of like, he could have, like, he's trying to not break character the entire time, but he can't keep in character. But the idea that he's like, no, even though I know I have to keep character, like this is important, like I still need to make sure my buddy's okay. And because he just did something really, really screwed up to keep our cover, and he did a better job. Like if he didn't do what he did, I would have blown our cover. Like he basically saved our asses, right?
Exactly.
So like the idea, like him recognizing that, him being like, hey, like that check-in, that meant so much, like to establishing that friendship.
Well,
I think it was
really
great.
Well done, that it was like, it's what I keep saying, that they're taking the time to show that these people care about each other, and that this stuff is affecting them. It's not just happening at them, it's happening to them, and they are experiencing it.
I feel like I think like one thing, an idea that's coming through my mind right now. I don't know whether or not, because we keep picking apart that episode 2 thing where they're like, hey, after this, let's never talk to each other. I just want to put this out there and get your thoughts on this. What if that was a scene where it was just a really awkwardly done scene to show off toxic masculinity? Because
that is obviously what it is. I'm never saying that they were saying their truth. I was saying that I wish they would just be honest with each other.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I at no point did I think they both think that is a good idea. I think they were having their chicken blinking contest still. Like they were still having their contest. Neither one of them will admit that they like each other.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. Okay.
So yes, it is toxic masculinity, but I just was like, oh, like I just wish they didn't do that, because there's so many other times we have where they snipe at each other, that it would have just been nice that in that moment they were like, and I know I'm saying something that would detract from how they're telling the story. So I'm not saying it would make the show better. It's just for my purposes, I see how much they care about each other. So I don't like that hurtful moment that they have for each other as they're still playing chicken.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair.
Anyway, I also should say before he takes the snake shot, they set up that Sharon is at least gonna cover them. You see her hooded up, and you see her a lot through whenever they're cutting. You kind of see her passing through. There's one scene
I didn't
that
notice
focuses
that.
on her. There is one
I actually
scene
didn't
that
notice
focuses
that at
on her,
all.
but a lot of the time, whenever they're like cutting to different angles, you can kind of see her moving around and like creating a perimeter.
See, I really genuinely didn't notice that. So I got to really rewatch that just to see it again, because when she came out, I was like, oh shit, this episode is going to be sick.
Yeah, like there's just one shot that focuses on, you don't see her face, but it's like clearly blonde hair coming out of a hood. And then after that, you see her moving around the bar, keeping an eye on what they're doing.
Yeah, because legit, when people were getting sniped down, I was like, what the hell's happening right now? That was something that went over my head. That's really, really cool. But yeah.
I like that they took the time to set up. She is covering them. It's not, and I hate when people say this because that's not actually what it means, but Deus Ex Machina, like it wasn't that. It was she saw some people she knows and she's like, oh, let me keep an eye on this situation.
Yeah, for sure. So we find out a lot through dialogue of where Sharon Carter's been.
Before we get to Sharon Carter,
yes,
there is the Selby scene itself. So she's in there, and we find out the name of the guy who recreated the serum is Nagel. She won't let them
William
know
Nagel.
where he is. Yeah, they won't. She won't let them know where it is, but they at least have a name now. And Sam gets the call from his sister, which really showed, like, you can just see. I think some people might take it as bad acting, but I took it as no. He's just so bad at being a bad guy that like nothing he says seems legitimate. When he's like, "Yeah, I've laundered so much money from those banks," and his sister's like, "What the hell are you talking about?" Like,
yeah,
I just liked that scene of like really highlighting like he can't do that kind of stuff.
I agree. It's one of those things where it's just like really. He was just really poorly prepared for it too, right? It was just Zemo being like, "Yeah, you look like Smiling Tiger. Just wear his outfit, you'll be fine." It was not like, oh, him. Like, yeah, it's not him at all. But he wasn't even prepped at all to be like, "Here's how you would behave. Here's how something like is really uniquely his thing."
You look like him. You're black. He's black. And I mean, he does look like him. But it does seem like, again, some more commentary on like Zemo.
It does seem like that.
You're the black guy. You look like him. Just.
Yeah, and that commentary was really, really interesting to me, is the idea of like, even like when he sees the pictures, like, okay, yeah, I do look like him, which is like so interesting. I'm like, what the hell? But like that, like he was set up for. We know that like Sam's not going to be convincing as a bad guy. There is Smiling Tiger.
I wouldn't have known that unless this scene happened. Like unless this episode happened. Like I don't know if he's good undercover. This episode shows no, he's not.
You know what? That's fair.
If he's gonna do it, then he needs to stay in the shadows because he won't be able to do this. I'm glad they did it, but it's not something I would have known before this episode.
Yeah, it is good character work that they're like, no, this is exactly why Steve did it, and exactly why Bucky didn't get the shield, because look how fast Bucky got into killing people again, or like beating people up. Even though yes, it was to keep a cover, it was to do all those things, but Zemo's point of like, look how fast that took. It's a good point.
Yeah,
look how fast he got back into
planting those seeds. Yeah. So then now this is where they run away. She's picking people off as a sniper, and then they talk. And this is what you were talking about. That it's kind of what we said last episode, that she didn't get a pardon.
Yes.
She's still on the run.
Yeah, I thought she
resents.
did. Yeah.
And she resents that like the Avengers didn't help. So it's the second time in this series that we're learning how little support Avengers actually gives. Like, Sam doesn't have any financial support, and someone who helped, I guess technically only half of the Avengers, but still helped the Avengers.
She helped the rogue part, to be honest. But I mean, either way, they got the rogue people got pardoned, so it's not like
exactly.
She
so
should
this
be
is the
pardoned.
thing. So this is the thing, is that like this is the other person people are kind of like, so she's just not who she was before. And I'm like, I don't know that that's a fair assessment. I think from 2016 to 2023, there's enough room for me to be like, yeah, she probably was really angry during that period of time. And then you add to it that people come back and get pardoned and she doesn't get pardoned.
Yeah. It's insult to injury. Yeah, insult to injury, especially
and I
because
know
like
that there's
she's really
something-
upset about it.
Yeah, I think there is something at the end of the episode that might clue us into maybe she's not as angry as she is because she's got something else going on. But I do think that if we're just taking the information we have up until that point, it doesn't feel like she's just a new character. I feel like that's just the character growing.
Yeah,
and she's angry. And
yeah,
like,
I mean, there's a lot of off-screen development that happened with her, and I'm okay with that. I mean, everything that she did here was perfectly explained. I mean, I would be pissed off not knowing, not being able to contact my family, not being able to go home, not being a fugitive, doing all this shady underground shit just to be able to survive, to be a complete departure away from what you were doing. Because here's the thing, what she did was stand for the right cause, so to speak. Okay, like what she believed was right. Like, yeah, she helped her friends, she did what, and then her friends got free, and then she didn't. Like, that creates a lot of anger in a lot of people, right? Especially if you still have things are being affected. It's not like you're, oh, okay, we're sorry for the past 5 years, let's invite you back. It's nothing like that at all. It's just like, no, you're still on the run. Technically, you're still a fugitive. And that's
the only
crazy.
I don't want to get too deep into that because I do feel like there's some stuff that happens later that I'm like, maybe this isn't all. But I just would say to people that are like, oh, why is she just a different character? I'm like, I think there's enough there for me to be like, she's not different.
She's not a different character.
Has gone through a situation that has changed her. Less bristly.
Correct.
Before. But anyway, yeah. So basically, they go back to home, and I thought again there was another moment where these 3 white characters decide to flex on Sam by being like, well, actually, this is what happens when you go to the Louvre, like this. And he's like, yeah, I get it. You're trying to make me feel like I'm less worldly than you. Fine, whatever. Like, and I'm glad he called it out. But it is what I've liked about the show from the beginning, exploring what it is like to be black in white spaces. And so him being like, well, I'm a good person. I assume you're a good person. So obviously you're not dealing art illegally. And she's like, yes, I am. And this is exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
She could have left it at that, but instead it was like, now let us give you a lesson on like what really happens with art.
Yeah. It's just like, here's the real world. I'm like,
and it's such a common thing that I've had where it's like,
so weird.
You feel, even if it's not what's happening, you feel like the white people in the room decide to like join forces, because those are 3 people that don't like each other, and they all join forces just to like make the black person feel less than.
Or like, here's our way of like just like teaching them about our culture. I'm like,
I mean, the teaching, that's I feel weird. Like it's more to just make them feel less than.
That's what I mean. It's like, let's band together, and then there's this there's obvious separation in there in that scene and all this kind of stuff. But I do like the idea that what Sam does there, he's like, he Googles it and all this kind of shit. She's like, oh no shit. Like, I like that because it's like, it shows the idea of like, Sam, even though he's learning these things, he's not naive to be like, the idea of like, okay, I'm still going to fact check what these white people told me.
Yeah, I think that was kind of cool. He doesn't have to take it as gospel. He's checking
exactly.
But yeah, so basically after that is when Sam is like, what happened to you isn't right. I'll get your name cleared. And she's like, yeah, right. And he's like, look, I love the way he said it. He's like, I got the bionic stare machine cleared, and he's killed everyone he's met.
I got the bionic stare machine. That was great. I love those little quippy.
So she's like, sure, whatever. So that is basically, yeah. Sharon isn't just helping them again because they're friends. She's like, I'm gonna need some assurances out of this. So then they do have that scene at the nightclub where I'm sure there's gonna be a gif of Daniel Bruhl doing his like techno dancing,
weird little side fist pump. Yeah. I think, and that's another scene where I'm like, oh, they're really trying to empathize and connect with a lot of like. This show is really
it's
a lot of bunch.
It's another time where they're taking a beat to be like, now they're just relaxing. Like this, that wasn't a scene where it's like we're secretly. It was just like, well, we have some time before we're gonna meet with Nagel, so like, because I thought it was a like, oh, this is what we're doing to collect information, but then literally the next scene is them just being like, wow, like Magic was a bit better than New York in terms of partying.
Yeah, they're like, yeah, that was great. It's like, oh, give it a run for the money kind of thing. Yeah, it was great.
But yeah, I like these moments where they're dealing with the human side of these characters. That like, sure, they're there for this mission, but like they can let off some steam at the club.
Yeah, because I like the idea here. It's like they're painting with so many gray brushes here, right? They're empathizing the Flag Smashers. They're empathizing. They're humanizing Baron von Zemo. They're doing a bunch of things here that are like, bad's not always all bad. And
I don't know if they're doing that.
They're not always. There's a human side to bad, but at the same time, it's just like, and here's how bad is under like here's how bad, like, people justify their bad or whatever. It's a very interesting exploration into how people make these decisions. So it's very interesting.
They find Nagel. I'm not gonna go into every single detail because we're almost at the hour mark now. They find him and he confirms, like, he was brought on when Hydra was like in Siberia. And then when Hydra got shut down, he moved to the CIA, which I think is fucked. And then like,
but it's true. That's real
it's
history.
A really good piece of information to have.
Yeah,
that the CIA picked this up, and he did perfect the serum based on Isaiah's blood, which they don't say explicitly, but I think it's quite clear that the information last episode and what he says, he used Isaiah's blood to isolate. And another interesting thing, because it's almost like the episode knew what I was thinking. I was just like, wait, there's super soldiers, but they didn't get bigger. And he's like, oh yeah, like this isn't where you get bigger. You don't need a stupid machine or like a bulky machine. It's just the serum, and it's subtle. And I'm like,
perfect, undetectable, all those kind of things. A bigger threat. I'm like,
to me, great.
That is awesome.
And then the blip happened, but he went away, and then he came back, and the power broker.
I believe what they said was the funding for it.
No, he went away.
He went away? Okay, I see.
So then when he came back, they were like, well, we're done with that program. And then that's why he's with the power broker now, because the power broker picked it up and kept it going. And that is his 20 doses that he created were stolen by the Flag Smashers.
Yeah. Yep. And there's going to be no more because he got popped.
Yeah. And Zemo kills him. They fight their way out. I don't want to get into the details of that. They got out of there. Yep. And I thought Zemo was going to leave them, but he didn't, because again, I think he's a thinker and he's got plans. And also, as I said earlier, he needs them to keep him out of jail.
Yes. By the way, I'm just going to do a quick shout out to the amazing fight scene that Emily Van Camp does as Sharon Carter. That is awesome. When she's taking down everyone outside, I'm like, that is so sick.
It's and I don't mean this as men are the ones who are supposed to fight. I mean, in these types of movies, especially the action movies, it would have been the woman that is inside talking, and then the men have to save her by fighting it. And then it's like, no, in this one, one woman is taking on all the bad guys. Well,
she can take care of herself and
the strong
very,
guys
very well
inside talking. And I think that is another good character building thing, or at least thing that isn't just regular Marvel action. At the very least, it's just not right. And I know it really is starting to bother me, the kind of discourse around this show, because it's doing so much that they don't usually do. And whether or not it's perfect, it's doing something different, and I'll always appreciate that over
I agree.
I think
we got to spin things differently,
and for some reason people are just not engaging with it.
Well, I mean, we've always seen people with what happens when they start to lose their sense of their world that they think they own. So that's just really, them throwing temper
tantrums. Getting really annoying, but yes, you brought up a very good point that they've even done a subversion there where you might be like, it's just an action scene, but it's like, well, actually break that scene down. It's the woman who is taking on all of those bad guys. And then the men are talking inside and and being saved by her. Multiple times throughout the episode. That's the second time she's helped them by taking care of the grunt work.
I will also
and it's her point out that gets them in there.
And I will also point out, if anyone wants to give me any guff about this, to really, really look at Wonder Woman in the role of Justice League, because she's the powerhouse there too. So there's a message being sent there too. So just like I don't know about that movie. I feel like that movie really does a disservice to Wonder Woman. It does a disservice, but that's the point. Yeah, that's the point of Wonder Woman. She's supposed to be the powerhouse of the Justice League up until Wonder Man. Not Wonder Man. Superman obviously comes in, but that's the thing, right? It's muddied, it's weird, but he was trying to do the same thing there too.
I don't know if he was. I think it just happened. I don't know what he was trying to do.
Fair enough. But either way, it's just like, when people are like, oh, I don't like that. I'm like, well, why don't you like it? I mean, like, why don't you like it? It's what's the problem with it? There's no problem with it. Come on.
I think we know what people don't like about it.
I know what people don't like about it. And I don't like them for not liking that. Yeah. Please say it out loud. Please say it out loud. Because I'm like, this is bullshit. But anyways,
there was a nice callback to, I would assume it's Civil War, where
the chair thing.
Sam's like, you're not going to move your chair up, are you? No.
Nope. That was the best. That's why
so
to
this
me,
is where I was like, oh, Sharon's acting weird. But again, I don't take this as, and that means he doesn't understand the character. I'm like, maybe there's a plan for her later. Not that.
Well, there's definitely a plan for her later.
But the way she was just like, okay, great reunion, bye. And you're like, it does seem like you would want to just stick with them. But she doesn't stick with them. And then you see the scene later where she's kind of like, we've got two problems. I'll explain it later. And you don't know who she's talking to. You see the woman outside the car, but clearly there's another person in the car with them.
Yeah. I feel like the interesting thing about that was like her reason for not going with them was perfectly valid. It's like, you guys are going back to America.
Keep up appearances of what she's saying. But I feel like this is where I believe there's a bit more to what's happening with her.
Oh, there's a lot more.
That she probably does have a bit more agency than she's letting on.
So my question is, there's a lot of theories about her being the power broker. I don't think that's the case. There's a lot of theories being like she works for the power broker. I think there's more evidence towards that, maybe, or like something's happening there. I don't know, but like there's some interesting plays going on with her. I don't know, like here's my one question to you, and just spinning this off. Do you feel like John Walker was talking about her?
Let's bet on someone with a better hand.
Yeah, because this is what I want. This is the point I want to make. She doesn't trust Falcon and Bucky to get her pardoned, to get back. But Captain America, I think she can trust him from the perspective of, oh, you've got the government behind you now. If I do this, and then like that's like whatever. Like I think that's where she might be coming from. But do you think that they were referencing her, not Sam and Bucky?
That would be interesting. I would like to see if that comes together, because she did say, "Hey, how about that new Captain America?" and it kind of just got cut off, which I was fine with. But
so if anything, you heard it here first.
She could be working with John Walker. True.
Yes.
But anyway, what happens next? This is the Carly scene you were talking about, where she talks about how she wanted to be a teacher.
Yes.
Which, again, they're building up like, oh yes, but it also for me hints at like she's probably not going to make it through this. Like, I feel like she's gonna die before this.
She's gonna.
He was like, yeah, maybe you'll be a teacher after this, after all. And she's like, well, we'll see.
Yeah,
we'll see. And I think she's kind of doing like a suicide mission here.
She's on a suicide mission at this point. I feel like.
But the last few information is the important thing here is that she knows Nagel is dead. Without us seeing her getting any kind of messaging, she knows Nagel is dead. So because he's basically like, oh, we're fucked, and she's like, no, because Nagel's dead, which means the power broker can't make more. So he's gonna have to work with us if he wants what we have, because we've got his whole supply now.
Right. So you know what I think is interesting now with this play, with what's happening here, with that because it seems to me the narrative is that Carly and a bunch of her people stole all 20 super soldier serums
yes, they did.
From the power broker. So the power broker is a guy that was funding that research, hoping to manipulate that, all that kind of stuff. So the question now ends up being, do we still think that John Walker has taken that super soldier serum? Because the super soldier serum, the way it's described by Nagler was like that it's perfect, that it's this, that it's this. We thought that the power broker was like, okay, here's this drug that will only last for a week. and you need to keep buying from me and creating that addiction model. Like that's what we thought the power broker was, right?
In the comics, yeah.
Yeah, but now it's painted out to be a very, very different thing. So this is pretty interesting. And the idea of like power broker was powerless in this and just trying to get his shit back.
Yeah, because I don't know if they took 8 of those 20 doses,
right? Or if they took all 20 and they have a few left over.
I thought they were saying they were going to give the vaccines to the kids, but it seems like they're going to give the super soldier serum to the kids.
Well, see that's the interesting thing, right? Was the vaccine like
there's not enough?
because they keep saying like vaccines was the word that they like, even in like on last episode.
I think the serum was in that shipment.
In the shipment? Okay, yeah. That's what I think too. Because I'm like, why would the power broker be so pissed off about vaccines? And I'm like, to me, I'm like, okay, there's probably super soldier serum in the vaccine shipment, but the fact that they're not kind of building that up is kind of weird. But either way, there's not enough time. There's enough super soldiers to do what they want to do. So,
but that's the thing, is that it is important to note that Carly is getting information basically in real time.
Correct. We already knew that though, and then that's a funny thing. We knew that the last episode when the power broker was directly texting her before they're about to go on a mission. Right?
Why would? Yeah, but that is someone being like, "Give me back my shit," not that she actually has information on what's happening.
Oh, that's
because it wouldn't be in the best interest of the power broker to be like, "Hey, like the guy that makes it for me is dead now, so now I have to work with you." That would be something she hears from someone else.
Right. Yeah.
So okay. I do think it is an important point that like she is getting information in real time. And I can see her getting information about which safe houses to go to, but to have information of being like, oh, Nagel's dead, like that seems pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is true. There's something being manipulated here.
But yeah, I just said, yeah, it doesn't seem like she plans on or wants to live past this mission.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. And then we cut to John and Lamar, and this is where I'm just like, yeah, they're done pretending to, or John is done pretending to be the good guy, because he's like, well, we're just gonna, and it's the whole all cops are bad thing. It's like, well, he is like, well, they're not gonna care if we just get the job done.
Yeah,
it doesn't matter how we do it if we get the job done. So Hoskins is like worried, like, so we're going to be doing this off the books. Like, yeah, obviously.
Like,
I'm done playing with it is, I feel like, echoing what Sam said at the end of the second episode of like, let's stop playing within these rules because it's not getting the job done.
Yeah, the idea of like, hey, it doesn't make sense. We're freelance. You guys are government. Like, we can do things that you can't. Like, he's noticing that, and he's just like breaking all his codes and all that kind of stuff. So he's like not even being a good military guy anymore. Like the idea that like done. Episode 2, the Star Spangled Man, was all about boasting his military achievements and accomplishments and how he's truly painted out to be a military guy. This episode is painting out to be like, okay, I'm all for me now. It's all for getting the results that I want to get through the methods that I want to get. And I'm just, and through my privilege, knowing that me as a white man can do whatever I want. And as long as I get the job done, people will celebrate that in one way, shape, or form. And Hoskins being like, there's still like even though he's part of like
he's part of the problem.
He's part, yeah, he's definitely part of the problem for sure. But it's the idea of like Hoskins not being that bad to the degree where he won't even suggest, or even like, are you like, when he suggests that, he's like, are you being serious right now? Like, are we really talking about this? That to me is just like, yeah, that dark path is being walked on very, very clearly from John Walker, and the ends justify the means. So we'll see what happens with his mentality there, because clearly that's the same kind of mentality that they're drawing that parallel between Zemo and a lot of bad people here is, oh no, not Zemo, Carly and the Flag Smashers is like the ends justifies the means, right? The idea where she's like blows up that building, she's like,
well, like, I didn't want to get to that part.
Sorry. But yeah, the ends justifies the means with Walker and that kind of ideology. Is like, we're then like we can do bad things as long as it's
I'm gonna move us along now.
Yeah.
Basically Sam feels bad about how Sharon feels, which I find was treated, which I do find interesting. Again, if you wanted to take a look at it racially, that he's still forced to take on someone else's discomfort before even his own at this point, where he's like, I should make it better for her. because I do think the show is showing that maybe she's in a better position than she lets on, but it's still the guilt that Sam is taking on of like, we got to do right by her. And I find that interesting that and he obviously talks about like how he hates how Isaiah is talked about.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, just some American, like as if he's not a real person or something.
Yeah.
Which I thought was good. And basically says, I probably should have just destroyed the shield instead of giving it back.
Yes.
And this is the first time I think we see Bucky be like, all right, then I'll take it. If that's how you feel about it, then I'll take it. I would rather I have it before you destroy that shit.
Because like the fact that Bucky's like, I understand how you feel about it, but please understand that shields mean something to other people too, and all this kind of stuff. And there's like this awkward kind of back and forth because like now the shield means something very, very dark to Sam because of Isaiah. And like it means so many dark
it means something very real in terms of how it broke up the Avengers and how it led to other people not being able to see their family anymore. In addition to what happened to Isaiah, but he's thinking about it in more recent terms as well of like, oh, like look at what it did to Sharon. So I just think that was a nice, interesting beat that we had where you're actually dealing with the toll this type of stuff takes on people. And not just having them punch people and make jokes. It's a very real thing. And then we get to what you were talking about, Carly stealing the supplies for kids, and rightfully so, saying you guys are sitting on like 6 months worth of supplies while there's people who need it. They could have got out of there perfectly fine. She had them all tied up, but she decided to blow them up, which the Australian guy's kind of like, whoa. And she's like, well, this is the only language they understand. And you're like, okay, well then, now it's harder to
justify
her side, not necessarily the Flag Smasher side, but it's harder to be on Carly's side. And that felt like they were trying to get to like, because Carl Morgenthau is a bad guy in the comics, so Carly will need to be a bad guy in this.
It's
we'll see how it plays out, but I do think that was a step towards being like, we were building up some gray zone for her, but realistically, she's a bad guy.
And that's what I mean. Like the dialogue in that whole episode, that like, I want to be a teacher, you still can, and her being like, it's just like, and then you see immediately what she does is like, oh, okay, that dream is dead for her. She knows that for sure. Like she's not going back. It's a suicide mission, or she's just going to go from one mission to another. But she's not. She knows that person that she was.
Like when Cap said, I think the guy that wanted to come back for a dance is dead. And I think he said it in Age of Ultron or something. I don't remember when he said it, but the idea is like, well, I just have to fight now.
That version of you is that naive version of you where you had hopes.
I wouldn't say naive. I would say,
or not naive, but hopeful.
Because I think a lot of this is, especially in the Captain America. I know it's all Marvel, but like in the Captain America movies, it is about humanity and how you hold on to it. So I would say it's not the naive part of her; it is the human part of her that might be slipping away.
That's true, and how institutions and everything like that dehumanize people through that's.
So then we get to the part that I was talking about, where Zemo is explaining what happened to Sokovia while they're in, I want to say Lithuania, and kind of just like, so you don't memorialize it. You haven't gone to the memorial. You're not shit or whatever, and they break off. And I have to say, I did not see this coming. Even when I saw the Kamoya beads, I was like, "What are those again?" Like, when Bucky starts picking them up, I'm like, "I know what that is, but I don't." It's been so long for me.
Oh my god! The moment I saw that, I was losing my shit. I was completely was like,
I know this is a thing. This is going to lead to something cool, but I don't remember who has those beads. And then Ao shows up, and I'm like, fucking sick. I love that this show has been able to be like, I feel like the strength this show had is people weren't looking forward to moments like this, like that was the moment. Like if you saw it in the trailer, like, oh, when's the time that they meet not Ao, but like they've cut around it so that you're like, oh, when's the time that Bucky will drop the bullets, or when's the time that, and then but each episode's been like, oh fuck, here's Don Cheadle as War Machine. Like Captain America is going to get out there and fight with them on that truck scene, or this time where it's like, yeah, they planted the seed early on of like, hey, do you think that the Wakandans are not going to forget that Zemo killed T'Chaka? No, they're not. And then at the end of the episode, it's like, yeah, I'm here for Zemo. So here we go.
It's so wonderfully beautiful. Everything about that was so well done. That, like the little, oh god, I can't remember what they're called, but those little beads.
I think they're called Kamoya beads.
Kamoya beads, and then Bucky just like picking them up, knowing
So
that he's being summoned. Yeah, it's such a good thing because he just goes like, I'm gonna take a walk right now or something like that right before they're about to do something too.
And Sam once again checking and be like, are you okay?
Yeah.
And him be like, yeah. I think they've done a really good job of showing that like they aren't just action stars. This isn't a show just about action beats, going from an action beat. It is about these two. I mean, as I said, this series, the Captain America series, is about like, will you lose your humanity if you like step up to these iconic positions? And I didn't think that was why they start with Red Skull, because like, yeah, his humanity just went out the door. He embraced it. He look at how he looks, and he's just like, yeah, I don't need the human stuff. This is who I am.
It's holding me back.
Steve being worried, like whether or not he vocalizes it, being worried, like, am I gonna turn into that if I do this? Like, and continually showing how human he is, even to the point of, and I will save my friend Bucky, even though it makes no sense.
Yeah,
like, that's how human he stayed. He didn't. Yeah. So it didn't mean human means you make the right decision. It means that like humans are flawed individuals, and he showed his flaws that way. Yeah.
And then those morals where you're like, okay, this is my moral code. I won't cross it, and all this kind of stuff, no matter how I'm tempted.
But then like, he did for Bucky, and I'm like, I think that is, it's interesting because obviously that's something that Bucky is worried about is, am I still human? Like, how much of me is still human? And Sam is dealing with it again. I don't know if he's vocalizing, but he's just like, yeah, if I take on Cap, how much of me is left? And it's the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, it entirely. And I get entirely. And the Sam thing is so complex because the idea of like him representing a country that doesn't reflect him, like him representing a country that doesn't reflect or respect him, is really, really problematic, right? Like that's what he's struggling with. It's not just like, oh, we need it is that kind of white lens where it's just like, we need Kaepernick someone that's good
during the
anthem. Right? It's like when conservatives are like, oh, we gotta stop cancel culture. I'm like, and you're pretending like you guys didn't cancel out Kaepernick. You guys are pretending y'all didn't burn up Nike shoes when he was like announced, like that's cancel culture at its finest, and you guys are doing the same thing. So like, don't complain about it when it happens to you, and you're trying to do it to someone else. Like,
and there are no real cases of it happening.
It's just like, oh, you're canceled from this platform, but you just move on to another platform. It's just like you're never truly canceled.
I don't know, and unless you want to be like, oh, like, you know, look what happened to Bill Cosby, or look what, and it's like, yeah, he raped people and then went to jail. That's not cancel culture. So
it's not cancel culture.
That is accountability culture, which I on Uncolonized get in trouble all the time for getting ramped up about people saying cancel culture. Like, there is no example you can show me where there is a version of cancel culture. Like, people are like, oh, Dr. Seuss got canceled. No, a company decided they don't want to do this anymore.
Yes. And what was the purpose?
10 million people emailed them being like, stop doing it. It's strictly a money choice.
That's 100%. It's purely capitalism that drives those things.
Yes.
I'm going to break this apart very, very easily and very quickly for people. When people say Christmas has been canceled, that is the biggest bullshit I've ever heard in my life. When people say Christmas is canceled, you really need to think about who are the companies that are saying happy holidays, because those are the companies that are worried about their bottom line. It's not that Christmas is canceled. It's just that not saying Christmas is better for business for everyone. So if you're all for capitalism and you're all against cancel culture, you've got to take some look at that, because it's just like, okay, these companies are trying to make more money. And studies have shown that if you say happy holidays, you don't isolate people from spending money during a high spending season or whatever it is. So it's not cancel culture, it's profitability.
Yeah.
Boom. There it is.
There we go. That was
Complete
Power
sidebar.
Broker. We never really meet Power Broker, or maybe we have and we don't know it yet. But I found it to be another interesting episode. I've seen people say it's the weakest episode.
I don't think they're seeing what we see. I think this is a great episode of character study and character building.
It is, as I said, it's very tiring. Even just seeing headlines for this show.
I agree.
Ignore what is actually happening in these episodes.
I agree. It's very clear that people are ignoring or not grasping, and therefore not talking about the importance of it. But for me, seeing these kind of topics being addressed dead center is like the best thing in the world. I'm like, yes, that's how you check your own privilege without, getting into a thing, making the other person more uncomfortable, all that kind of stuff. Like, we talked about that when that happened. There's so much here that's just like, yep, that's how how it should be done, or like, that's crazy, like whatever. But this is great. This is great for a lot of people. Might not great for a lot of people. This is just fantastic.
I am very much enjoying the show. Anyway,
absolutely.
If you enjoy this show, it's good news for you, because we're part of the That Shelf Podcast Network, which means we're on the same network as shows like Bad Gay Movies, Black Old Films, Changing Reels, Composers, No Budget Nightmares, What a Great Theme Song, and more. So please head on over there. You'll be able to find those great shows, our shows. If you'd like to listen to older episodes of our shows, you can go to tdfeverything.com/spoiledrotten. Our email is spoiledpodcast@gmail.com. Our Twitter is @tdfspoiled. So please hit us up there. I would like to say that we are on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Radio Public, all sorts of things. So please head to your podcatcher of choice. If you don't see us there, contact us at the place as I told you. If you do see us there, please rate, review, and subscribe, and share with your friends. I would also like to say that we did a poll on my Instagram where we asked if the week-to-week dissemination of WandaVision worked for people, and 100% of the people that replied said no. So I just want to say we're not talking out of our ass. People did not enjoy the week-to-week of WandaVision. Who knows what they think of this? But anyway, thank you very much for listening, everybody. Goodbye.
Cheers.
This has been a TDF Everything production, brah.